Alright, it's time to rank every season of Total Drama. I already said how I felt about all of these seasons in the rating every episode of Total Drama video, so this video isn't going to be too long. It's not going to be a deep dive or a breakdown, nothing like that. This is just about ranking the seasons and giving them in order with some brief explanations attached. Alright, it's time to get in here. In 8th, I have the Ridonculous Race coming in last place. Ridonculous Race isn't actively bad like some seasons that are coming up shortly after it, but there's also nothing memorable about it. It's very bland. I didn't like those first few episodes because there were just way too many characters to focus on and not enough screen time for everyone, so no one really got a fleshed out storyline early on. It's just challenges. And speaking of the storylines, even when they got deeper in the game and there were less people to focus on, the storylines were still limited. In the Survivor style of Total Drama, there's more possibilities, even before the merge, even when they're just in their starting teams. While in the Amazing Race style of Total Drama, storylines were really just limited to a person and their partner, and that's it for the most part. The bland and non-existent storylines in some episodes caused my episode ratings to sound like this episode had a good challenge, so it's good. This episode's challenges weren't good, so this episode is bad. Like in some episodes, all they really had to offer were challenges. Ridonculous is alright, but also there's not much rewatch value and it didn't really add anything to my Total Drama experience. I wish that I would have skipped right to Total Drama Island 2023 after finishing Pahkitew Island and just classified Ridonculous Race as the spin-off that it is. Ridonculous just flat out wasn't the Total Drama that I was there for. The worst camp season is a more enjoyable and memorable watch than Ridonculous because even if they had bad storylines and bad writing, at least they're entertaining and it's not all about the challenges. It's better for Ridonculous to just be ranked on its own as a good spin-off rather than trying to go up against the seasons in the main series because they'll always have the edge. So Ridonculous is going to be at the bottom of the list in 8th place. In 7th place, I have Total Drama All-Stars. Out of the standard camp style, Survivor style seasons, this is definitely the worst. It's often compared to the season that came after it when this was definitely worse. First off, the cast looks solid, but Sam and Sierra shouldn't have been there. I would have liked to see them get cut or keep them, but add some extra spots to get like a Lashana or Brick in there, something like that. Next, even though the cast looks solid on paper and they had a bunch of heavy hitter names like Heather, Duncan, Alejandro, and much more, it doesn't even matter because all of these characters were a shell of what they were in previous seasons. There was strategist Heather just leaving her idol there to be taken by Alejandro. Then there was Alejandro showing Mal that he had evidence against him, making it easy for Alejandro to get stumped out. Like everyone was dumbed down to make Mal look so amazing. Also, All-Stars just went out in the worst possible way, with most of the contestants just floating away and they were never heard from again, at least up to this point. And Camp Wawanakwa, the place that started it all, sank underwater. It's like everyone and everything had a bad send-off. At least the island got brought back for 2023, so there's that. But it's unfortunate that just about all of these amazing all-star characters that had been built up over the years went out on a bad note when this season was really supposed to be a celebration of them. Also, the writing in this season was atrocious and they actually had some continuity mistakes when talking about events that happened in previous seasons. The one that I didn't talk about in the rating video was when Courtney said that she kissed Alejandro years ago. Maybe it was off screen, but in World Tour, they flirted, but they did not kiss. That never happened on screen. And that wasn't the only continuity mistake. That really just sums up the amount of effort and care that was put into this season, or the lack thereof. This season was so deceiving because on paper, just looking at the cast, it should be an extravaganza. but it was a complete train wreck. That's why it lands here in 7th place. In 6th place, I have Total Drama Action. For a while, I've been saying that Total Drama Action is the Total Drama All-Stars of the original 3 seasons. It gets propped up with the other 2 when really it's just a case of this season also having the same original cast and being sandwiched in between 2 better seasons. This season doesn't belong in the conversation at all. First off, the first 7 or so episodes were horrible. They completely wasted them on this dumb Trent simping storyline. I also didn't like how one of my favorite characters in Gwen got taken out as a byproduct of this. Also, speaking of the first 7 or so episodes, Justin was the villain of early Total Drama Action and he failed. He had no aura and the way that he got players eliminated was boring. Speaking of Justin, the reason why Action is baby all-stars is because some of the characters just got derailed or flat out ruined. Although Justin had more character than he did in Island, he still failed and was so unnecessary. I like to think that there's a reason why this guy wasn't brought back for World Tour and got his mojo taken by Alejandro. Then there's Courtney. She was alright in Island, but she's so unlikable and bratty in Action. And they just ruined Trent so badly that they didn't even give him a redemption arc in World Tour. They just couldn't bring him back. And although characters like Heather and DJ didn't get derailed, they just didn't have a role in this season. Like, they didn't make their mark. Ultimately, they took a back seat for characters like Lindsay, Harold, Courtney, and Duncan to shine. Also, the cast was too small, which led to a bunch of filler episodes or less eventful episodes to pad out the season to get to that 26 episode mark that they were trying to reach. There were a lot of reward challenges and some aftermath shows that didn't really add much to the season. Also, they brought Izzy and Owen back into the game after they got eliminated, and they let Courtney enter the game. Like, this stuff is just adding extra rounds to the game and more episodes. I can't respect the filler because there's already a very limited cast and the dynamics can get stale sometimes. Also, the end game was a slog to get through. They spent 2 episodes on the final 4 and 2 episodes on the final 2. And the way that this season ended on an anticlimactic jury vote was terrible. Total Drama All-Stars was a season that was horrible, but it was over with quickly. While Total Drama Action was a season that never reached those lows, but it was such a boring slugfest of a season to get through. It was a close call, but I gave the edge to Action because in All-Stars, some of that stuff just feels like it's straight out of a fanfic. At least with Action, while some of their ideas were interesting and questionable, at least Action had some sense of structure and didn't go completely off the rails. Action is better than All-Stars, but in the end, it's still not a good season of Total Drama, so Action is going to land here in 6th place. In 5th place, I have Total Drama Pahkitew Island. This season, or this half of season 5, is always in comparisons with All-Stars for which one is worse. But not only is it better than All-Stars by a solid margin, it's actually better than Action. This cast was very high variance. There were some characters that I love like Scarlett, Sugar, and Ella, just top tier Total Drama characters overall. But then there's characters that I never want to see on my TV screen again like Rodney, Dave, and the twins. Speaking of the twins, they were a big storyline in early Pahkitew Island and I didn't like it. It didn't add anything to the season for me. Speaking of things that I didn't like, I just didn't like any of the showmances that they were going for in Shazman and especially Scave. And these 2 showmances are going to take up a decent amount of screen time, so that's not ideal. But despite not liking some of the characters and both of the showmances, this was a character-driven season, and the good characters really made this season and saved it from being as bad as All-Stars and Action. This season was still below average. It's not a good season of Total Drama, but it's better than Action because it's more entertaining with its pacing and characters, and it's better than All-Stars because at least the storylines were better and they made more sense. And at the end of the day, at least they didn't ruin fan favorite characters like in All Stars. Pahkitew Island had their own bad characters, but they're not just taking characters that I've seen be good, I know they can be good, and just completely ruining them and all of the memories. So that's why it lands in 5th place. Now it's time for the good half of this list. These seasons are comfortably good. In 4th place, I have Total Drama, Revenge of the Island. When I was younger, I didn't really give this season much of a chance. I liked that they made their return to the island, but it was with a brand new cast, which was unfortunate because even though it was just 3 years, I felt like I grew up with the original Total Drama characters and this just felt like a spin-off. But after the rewatch, I've just completely changed my opinion on this season. Now, this was the season where everything started going off the rails with the Toxic Waste Island and Chris McClane going even more insane. This is definitely not the laid-back summer camp show that Total Drama Island was. But there's still some fun to be had in this season. A big standout was Scott and his villainy. A big reason why action tanked was because of their lack of a consistent and good villain. Justin was terrible, and while Courtney was a bit better than Justin, she wasn't there for the whole season. Revenge doesn't have a villain problem at all, because they have Scott, a top tier villain in all of Total Drama. Also, the jock rivalry was great. Joe versus Brick, Joe versus Lightning. Their banter and shenanigans were always a highlight. And yeah, outside of Stacy, this was actually a solid cast. Also, I liked how in most episodes, they had a special guest contestant from that Gen 1 cast. It was nice to see them. Also, while the 13 episode format didn't really work for All Stars, it definitely worked for Revenge. I like that I could binge watch this in a day and still get an understandable and interesting story without it jumping all over the place. So yeah, Revenge was actually a solid season. That's why it's in 4th place. In 3rd place, I have Total Drama World Tour. This season started off amazingly. Their first song, Come Fly With Us, was an instant banger, along with a lot of other songs in the show. The aftermath shows finally had some relevance, unlike in action. Also, they added a new villain in there, Alejandro, and he really spiced things up. Definitely the most interesting, flashy, and strategic villain at this point in the show. Also, the Courtney, Gwen, and Duncan love triangle was amazing in this season only, not in All Stars. At that point, that stuff happened years ago. Get over it. But in World Tour, it actually added some nice and juicy drama to some episodes. World Tour has a lot of stuff going for it. But the problem is that this season got stale around that late mid-game section, right after Gwen's elimination in episode 16. And outside of Alejandro and Duncan, I really don't like this final 7 that much, so at that point, this season was just limping to the finale. And they also had some filler episodes and aftermath shows to pad it out. If World Tour ended in episode 15 or 16, then it's probably the best season ever. But like I said, it went stale, and the other seasons that I have above World Tour didn't struggle with that, so it's gonna land in 3rd place. In 2nd place, I have Total Drama Island 2023, which is actually a surprise to me because I thought that my original top 2 was Definitive and Unbreakable. But Total Drama Island 2023 was able to shatter that and get in between those two. This season had a stacked cast. They had Bowie, the Strategist, Julia, the Challenge Beast. I was actually really rooting for her in the second half of the season. Then there's Scary Girl Lauren, an unhinged chaos merchant. And that's not even all they had to offer. Like, this was such a colorful cast of characters. Also, the challenges were fun. The standout for me was that hanging on a pole challenge, which brought me back to old school Survivor. The only bad thing that I can say about this season is that they had a whole episode about farting. But even then, unlike World Tour, this season is actually entertaining all the way through. It never got stale or fell off a cliff, especially near the end game. That's where it picked up for 2023 and got bad in World Tour. Most of that can be attributed to the faster paced 13 episode format, but it is what it is. Total Drama Island 2023 was solid, and I'm hoping that the second half is even better. So yeah, it's gonna land in second place. In first place, I have Total Drama Island, the season where it all started. I just like the summer camp aspect of it. Like, the challenges were tame. They had hide and seek and dodgeball. And while these challenges were simple, they're still some of the best challenges in the show because of that simplicity. It's fun. Also, the showmances were nice. All of them were handled so well in the first season. It's the best season for showmances. And Heather versus Gwen was a fun rivalry to follow all season. Also, I liked how this season was able to be a bit more mature and grotesque than the seasons that followed. Like, at points, this legitimately felt like an adult show, and that vibe gave Island its own charm, its own flow. The only minor negative that I have to say about Island is that there's some challenge rules and eliminations that made no sense, but that's not a deal breaker. Everything was executed so well in this season, especially the 26 episode format. It is the best season for that. They had episodes that were sort of filler, like Hawk Capture and Camp Castaways, but that's expected, and they didn't bring this season to a halt. Actually, when watching, say, week to week, like how I watched it in the 2000s, those episodes actually serve their purpose well, and they're nice for getting to know the characters more. Total Drama Island is not only the best Total Drama season, but it's legitimately one of the best shows, one of the best seasons of a show that I've ever seen. Alright, those are the rankings. Like I said, my full thoughts on these seasons are already out there on the rating every episode of Total Drama video. I just wanted to properly rank them, as this was going to be a part of that video, but I was up in the air at the time. This is a solidified list that I thought of for some months, and yeah, I legitimately feel this way about these seasons. I really enjoyed making this video, and yeah, that's about it.